This is FightFans Radio.
Let's get ready to rumble! Oh my God! Unbelievable! Down goes Frazier! Down goes
Frazier! It's time! You're listening to New Mexico's only mixed martial arts and boxing podcast, The Low Blow, on AdamCombatSports.com and FightFans Radio. It might be the end of the world tomorrow, but at least you'll have the low blow to kind of soften the blow of what exactly is going to happen with the end of the world. I'm Justin Goodrum along with Will McClary and Jorge Hernandez. So guys, so with this Mayan's end of the world thing, do you know what exactly is supposed to happen? Is it an asteroid? Global warming? What exactly is supposed to be the cause of all that?
I don't know, but I picture, the worst possible heavyweight match of all time happening right in front of Will's eyes. That's what I picture.
Just his head exploding, and that'll be it. That'll be a wrap.
What would be your worst matchup of the current boxers in the heavyweight division? Would both Klitschko's in the ring make your world end, Will?
I think that would be the best, man. I probably have to see maybe Tony Thompson against a Klitschko again. That would probably be right there.
Oh my God, that would be disastrous for you, bro.
Well, today, guys, luckily this weekend, even though it's great when we have a lot of fights to talk about, but we get a break right before Christmas. Not a lot to discuss, so we're pretty much gonna just decompress in this review what we saw this past weekend on HBO and on Showtime with Donair and Amir Khan. We're gonna break down really two good cards, both on FX. Featuring the finale of the UFC Ultimate Fighter Smashes and the finale of Shane Carwin versus Roy Nelson, their season of the Ultimate Fighter, where we know that Shane Carwin got hurt and Matt Mitrione took his place to take on Roy Nelson. As always, you can contact the show through Twitter, through @TheLowBlow, through email, through lowblow505@gmail.com. Also, you can contact FightFans Radio through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Ustream, all using their name. That has our show along with the rest of the FightFans Radio network. And we are on U.S. Combat Sports, Southwest Fight, and, of course, FightFans Radio. So, guys, we're going to get into the standing 8 count, and we start off with some breaking news and some good news for some big fights coming to Albuquerque. First, it was Friday night fights coming to Santa Fe, and now we have a possibly a huge MMA event coming to Duke City.
That's right. Last week, or I believe the week before, is when we broke the news that ESPN would be making its way to Friday night fights in January. I mean, hopefully in February, we're going to see Bellator Fighting Championships. A source did confirm with swfight.com, with Southwest Fight News, that Bellator has applied and filed an application for a promoter's license in the state of New Mexico. A likely venue will probably be the Santa Ana Star Center in Rio Rancho, just because it's hosted televised events such as Bellator before. WEC 32, for instance, was one, and then Shark Fights 15 was another nationally televised event that they did hold. So big news for not just New Mexico, but the Southwest in general, because it's not too much that Bellator, it makes its way to Vegas a lot, but not necessarily to the New Mexico, El Paso, Arizona area. So this is huge news and great news for even local fighters who are sure to be put on there. Bellator does a good job of putting local guys on an event, so hopefully they do the same. They bring up guys from El Paso, even Southern Colorado, and all of New Mexico. So I'm very excited for this. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, well, this is a huge deal because with Bellator moving to Spike on January 17th, if this New Mexico card, specifically Albuquerque, does happen in February, it will be right in that 3 months kind of not a trial period, but kind of that 3-month period where we get to see how Bellator does on a Thursday night time slot, and with kind of Albuquerque and with its tradition of MMA and boxing here, I think it'll be a great showcase for the city. I want to ask you, Jorge, with Bellator, this is not the UFC. This is Bellator MMA. I think the last time we had a big MMA event come here, it was MMA Fight Pit, which is on pay-per-view. That did not draw big numbers. It was somewhat well hyped. It had two guys, I believe, at least one of them fought in the UFC with Houston Alexander. That did not really do so well. I mean, I was there. You were there, man. Jorge. and it didn't really draw a big crowd. So with Bellator, even though it does have that Spike TV cachet to it, even though it is more of a known organization, how do you think the turnout's going to be? I mean, with the WEC, I believe Donald Cerrone was on there and Carlos Condit was on that card. Am I correct about that?
Cerrone was not on it.
It was not, okay.
Damasio Page was on it.
Okay.
Ox Wheeler was on it.
Okay.
Leonard Garcia, who's from Texas, but I mean, he's trained out of here for a few years now,
yeah.
was on there. You know, Miguel Torres was a big name that was on there too, and of course, Carlos Condit did fight in that one too. Jamie Varner was another big name that fought on that card. So we had decent names. What I think Bellator has to do is, I mean, stay, you know, within the roots, and then just build off of the local talent here. If they get some decent names that are up and coming and make them, you know, not necessarily local guys, maybe guys that train out of here and people are familiar with, but also just, you know, based off the fact that what they could do is, you know, have guys that were born and bred here that people really know about, and then maybe mix it in with guys who have moved here to actually train. So that'd be great to see if they did something like that. And with the Santa Ana Star Center, if they do choose a venue of that size, it maybe fits the most, maybe 6,500 people, but they're not overshooting the way MMA Fight Pit did by only having less than 3,000 people in what is a 17,000 seating stadium. You know, that WEC event drew less than 5,000 people, about 4,600, which is pretty good, even by boxing standards. Like, let's say an HBO card. You know, 4,600, 5,000 fans is very good. So even if they were to do between the 2,000 to 4,000 range, I think they'll actually see it as a success just because of what other big events have actually have drawn here within the city. But, you know, if they promote it right, they have the right kids on there, you know, I think they do 3,000, 4,000 easy.
Yeah, I think this is a golden opportunity. If they bring the right card here, I could see Albuquerque becoming a really untapped resource to bring these cards here, because I think if the product's good and if they consistently bring it, I think you'll see bigger and bigger crowds. I mean, you can branch out. I mean, you can do, you know, possibly Tingley one time. You could do even the pit. I mean, we talked about that before with the logistics of the UFC, but Bellator doesn't run the big kind of production that the UFC does. And so where the UFC is kind of afraid of the pit for whatever reason, you know, Bellator could gain that exposure here. So I think that's awesome news. So in our second news item, it looks like Robbie Lawler will be returning to the UFC, and it looks like he's going to fight Josh Koscheck at UFC 157. Koscheck's been pretty much been flapping his gums as usual on Twitter and on the MMA boards. I think the last time we heard of Josh Koscheck from him, was pretty much telling Johnny Hendricks kind of to shut up. And I think he even, I'm not sure this is correct or not, but I'm sure he put his name in the hat to fight him, as he always does. There's a welterweight available. But I think this fight with Robbie Lawler is really intriguing. It's going to take place on the undercard of Ronda Rousey versus Liz Carmouche, along with Uriah Faber, Ivan Menjivar, and, of course, Dan Henderson versus Yoel Machida. So that card is going to be great, barring any injury.
Well, Pretty Boy Floyd loves to fight in May, so I guess it made sense with his name being Mayweather. So, as we already speculated, on May 4th, 2013, Pretty Boy is going to definitely pick an opponent. There's been talks between Canelo Alvarez and Robert Guerrero, but nothing has been confirmed except for that specific date. And Mayweather hasn't fought since last May. You know, he had that jail stint, so he wanted to make sure that he's going to be rejuvenated for the fight. But we can definitely see this fight happening. Now, me personally, of course, it would be great to see him against either fighter. I think it'll produce a good fight, but I'm probably going to think he's going to go with Guerrero, and it's going to take place in Las Vegas. So, you know, Floyd Mayweather, he's used to fighting those big fights, so I'm sure he'll be comfortable. And we always see him fight in May. I wish he would fight more. And then, of course, he's gonna fight another time in 2013 as well. So it should be interesting. Whoever he picks, we can't lose. It's a win-win situation.
What have I been saying for the past 2 weeks, guys? It's going to be Guerrero in May and then Canelo in September. He's setting himself up for that Mexican money.
I don't know. It might backfire, man. Those guys are tough.
Who knows? I mean, that Robert Guerrero, it's not an easy task. But I mean, who knows? Definitely. I mean, Mayweather's one of the best of all time. So I'm sure he might find a way around Guerrero. But Guerrero's a good young fighter. In other news, I don't know if a lot of people like this or not. I'm sure they like to see Melvin Guillard back in action, but Melvin Guillard and Jamie Varner have officially been put on next week's UFC 155 event as part of the four-fight FX televised portion of the prelims. What do you guys think about that? How do you feel about that, Jay?
I like that fight. Melvin, I mean, both these guys are very intriguing. I mean, we all know the story of Varner pretty much announcing his retirement and then him coming back, and I think he beat Edson Barbosa, I believe. Barbosa, has, I think that spinning heel kick, was that in 2012, right? Did that happen? Was that on the UFC Brazil card earlier this year, or was that 2011?
May have been 2011. I'm not sure, though. You might be right on that. But
okay, Varner was the underdog, and he beat him. So I think, he has some momentum, along with, Melvin Guillard's always intriguing. He's one of those guys that we know what he is. I mean, he has heavy hands, and he has, virtually a limited ground game. So it's an exciting fight. Both guys, are heavy opinionated to talk a lot of trash. I think I read that Guillard claimed that Varner kind of faked his illness. So I don't really believe that, since the guy's about to go out there and fight. I mean, why would he waste his time? So I think it'll be, a decent fight. It's good for the undercard, and I think, especially because the main card is not really that, full of stars, I think this will be one of the standout fights of the evening.
Yeah, well, it just made a decent card a little bit better there for December 29th, and again, for local people, don't forget that Jackson's fighters, Leonard Garcia and Eric Perez, are on there as well.
Yeah, I think Leonard Garcia got an opponent changed.
Yep.
I think his original opponent had to pull out, so I'm glad he's still on that card.
Well, the fireworks are going to be popping off again against Brandon Rios and Mike Alvarado. The rematch is taking place on March 16th at the Staples Center. Looking really forward to this one. The first one, that was a great classic fight. I wanted Alvarado to last a little bit longer in that fight, but, he still put on a great performance, and it's good enough to see it again. And, it's no coincidence. Rios was actually being lined up to fight Manny Pacquiao, but we know Marquez got in the way of that. But, either way, it's going to be a great fight again. This is a rematch that I think everybody's going to be looking forward to. And we'll see if Alvarado can do any better. What do you think Alvarado needs to do to stand a better chance against Rio, Jorge?
Box a little bit more. I mean, keep his distance. He was doing such a good job of that in the first two rounds that it's his style. It's not necessarily that he's not really a boxer puncher. I mean, Alvarado's more of a brawler. He likes to sit in the pocket and throw punches, but he has to work that jab and just work the outside a little bit more the way he did the first two rounds, because ultimately, Brandon Rios is going to chop you down like a tree, and then you can't chop you can't chop a tree down if the tree is using those branches to keep you away. So
no doubt, you're poked in the eye.
Well, the results are in from this past UFC action. Really, technically, one was a UFC on FX, the other one's the Tough 16 finale, but both of them had Ultimate Fighter implications. The one on Saturday from Australia, UFC on FX6, received a total of 972,000 viewers, while the prelims on Fuel only received 96,000 viewers. This is via MMA Junkie. This whole report's via MMA Payout, really good website for all the numbers concerning mixed martial arts. That's down from the 1.1 million average from the UFC on Fox 5. So that's not to be really, surprised about. I mean, the main event, Saulo Robles and Ross Pearson, really not really two well-known names. The fight was somewhat intriguing, but that whole card really Hector Lombard got a really huge victory against Plajares. But in terms of really big-time names, there really wasn't any. And again, the Friday night time slot really not that good. Compared to Saturday, which you had an entire season on FX. And for those, even though we kind of bashed the Ultimate Fighter a lot, there was at least some people that watched that season compared to people watching, the Ultimate Fighter in Australia. Those did better numbers on the Saturday show, averaging a 1.3 million viewer average on Saturday night. So overall, decent ratings. I don't think you're going to really look into these numbers really too much. Both kind of minor cards for the UFC. I think the only question is why have two cards kind of stacked together like that when all your focus is supposed to go on that Ultimate Fighter finale in the United States. But nevertheless, those are the numbers for the UFC this past weekend.
And in other news, I don't know if people are too excited about this, but apparently Shane Mosley is not going to train with Naseem Richardson for his comeback. He's going to rehire his pops. Shane Mosley looks like he's headed to a WBA welterweight title fight against Paul Malignaggi. I don't know how he ended up that, but Malignaggi had been calling him out for a while. Of course, Shane Mosley's last 2 fights were against Manny Pacquiao in May of 2011, and he got destroyed by Saul Alvarez in May of this year. So, is he worthy of this title shot? I don't know. Maybe obviously it's his history, and maybe it'll draw a certain amount of money. The fight will definitely be on Showtime or HBO, so these guys are definitely going to get paid somehow. And Paulie just, I think, wants a big name on his record, and why not take out an aging Shane Mosley? I'm not too thrilled about the fight, to be honest, but Paulie really doesn't have a mandatory right now. So, I mean, by all means, to fight someone ranked in the top 15 just so you can keep your status as champion. He chooses an aging fighter. He's not really going out on a limb, but I don't know. Shane Mosley might still pack a punch, and Paulie might regret the decision, but I doubt he will. He'll be a heavy favorite in this fight, I think.
Mm-hmm. Now we go 3 rounds. Who wants to start us off tonight?
I got to go. That was a perfect segue with the Sugar Shane Mosley, because I am definitely irritated by this fight. Look, this guy needs to just let go. He had a great fight against Margarito, but every other fight has just been disappointing. He hasn't been knocked out, but it hasn't been the sense that he's actually going to win this fight. Paulie Malignaggi, of course, he was disappointed that Ricky hadn't got knocked out, because they had, a big payday for him in the rematch, but it just didn't happen. But to choose, Sugar Shane coming right back, well, I don't even know how long he stayed retired, but not long enough for it to even settle in. And I don't think at all it's going to make a difference between his father training him and not seeing Richardson. So, I mean, this is just what I'm talking about right here. Shane, he's already exhibiting signs of a fighter that definitely needs to stay retired. With Paulie Malignaggi, I mean, let me back up a little bit. With his loss to Canelo, I mean, that was honorable. He stayed. I wouldn't say he actually went toe to toe, but he definitely survived the 12 rounds. He made some efforts. He landed, some okay shots, but of course he never really fazed Canelo. And he got to retire fighting the next up and coming star. But to come back and fight Paulie Malignaggi, no, man, this fight is gonna be resembling like Sergio Moore to me. He's gonna be fighting a guy that really doesn't really pack a punch. That moves around the ring good. And, Shane is getting older. He's not able to chase these guys like he is. And, his combinations are not, coming together like they once used to. So, why risk your legacy against a guy like Paulie Malignaggi? Like, Paulie Malignaggi, he's a good cat. I like him. But, I mean, in the comparison between him and Canelo, I mean, if he loses to Paulie, that's just really not a good look. And then he's going to be back talking about retirement with this another loss. I mean, it's just, don't tarnish your legacy anymore. It's over. But, you can't convince him of this, and we're going to see him again. And this is pretty much a meaningless fight. If Sugar Shane pulls it off, it's not like he's going to, he's not going to find like his second coming or anything like that. And if Paulie pulls it off, he just beats an aging fighter. It's just a waste.
Woo! I don't know if I could follow that up. I don't necessarily have a rant. I have, I guess, more of along lines of a plead, I guess, for people and fans of MMA, and not just MMA, but of combat sports in general here in Albuquerque and the state of New Mexico, to please attend these 2 events that we're getting this year. We're being spoiled. We didn't have, really 2 big national events come in 2011, but we need to support these events for them to keep coming. And if you folks want a UFC to come here to the pit, you have to support this, I guess, middle-of-the-road events like the ESPN event in January in Santa Fe and the Bellator event in February. That's definitely what we have to do. I mean, they're building it and they're providing it for you, but you have to go. So, it's a plead, I guess, man. Please show up to these things.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think part of it is just, getting those names. I think it's all about the name value and not about the event itself. So hopefully they come and check those out. My thing is just about Strikeforce. It seems like I talk about this a lot, but I think recently, on Twitter within the last hour or so, it's been confirmed that it will be the last Strikeforce event on January 12th. I think the Yahoo Sports story broke that Strikeforce did confirm that, and Scott Coker did confirm that on the Strikeforce website. I just didn't like how this promotion just kind of died, and all this kind of like, stings with Dana White. Like, we'd ask him a question, he wouldn't even kind of comment about it, even though they're under contract. It's just a sad end for what was once a really great organization that did a lot of positive things with really not only the California fight community, but in nationwide in all of mixed martial arts. So I just hope that the January card can be a celebration of that organization, and we can move on and hopefully get those fighters in the UFC, because ever since Zuffa bought the company, it's been a disaster to say the least. So I think I'm ready to move on. So guys, let's talk about this weekend's boxing action. Some good fights. I want to talk about Nonito Donair against Jorge Arce. He got the KO, third round, 259. This was on, I believe, HBO. A lot of commentators made a point to point out about Nonito Donair being 24/7 tested all the time by the major drug commissions. This guy puts his drug test on the internet. He gets tested all the time randomly. They say he's the beacon of hope for what the commentators said. It could be, the sport of boxing could be getting, tarnished with all these positive tests concerning performance-enhancing drugs. So before we get to that, I want to kind of ask you guys about Jorge Arce. They kind of celebrated his career. He announced his retirement after the loss. Was this a rematch for Donair? Did this fight benefit Donair in terms of his improving as a fighter? Because they said he had an injury to his knuckle. This seemed to be kind of a risk to put him in there with a pre-existing injury. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, the way it looked, first and foremost, I got to give Jorge his props. He was completely right. I thought that maybe we could possibly have a great trilogy, and as soon as I saw the size difference, I was like, I don't even know what I was thinking. And then, Nonito, he could have came in there with one hand, basically. His hand could have been chopped off, and he could have been okay. It was just horrible. I was just pretty much utterly disappointed. They mentioned that they were friends. A lot of times those fights are despicable because they can't separate that friendship in the ring. And I don't think that Nonito necessarily had a problem with that. It was just a mismatch. I never saw Arce even standing a chance against Nonito Donair. And I got to commend Donair, he's willing to take the drug test, but yet he's not making it mandatory for his opponents, which could really tie him up. If he did choose to do that, it could tie him up in terms of not getting those great fights. But, he's willing to take the test. He's not trying to make sure that his opponent does. He's willing to fight anybody. And, this guy's fighting. He fought 4 times this year. So that's great for, a fighter of his elite status to do that. Because normally, for the superstars, we only see him maybe once or twice. But, Nonito, he's continuing to improve in the ring. I can see it, but the only thing that I've always said before, when you get these early knockouts like this, it's great. Of course, it looks great on the resume. However, in terms of preparations for other big superstar fights where you might have to go all 12 rounds, it's a little bit of the risk. But nevertheless, he looks great in there, but it was definitely a mismatch, and that definitely wasn't his fault. That just exhibits how good this guy really is.
It's something I just thought about the size difference, man, and how Donair, is a big super bantamweight, and we saw that, and it was evident in the ring, and it just wasn't necessarily even the height difference. I thought it was just the pure skill that Nonito Donair holds. He's a very good technical boxer, but people forget that he does have power. We haven't seen it showcased since he defeated Fernando Montiel at the beginning of 2011 with what may have been the KO of the year. He's faced some tough opponents, and if you ask me, I think he's the 2012 Fighter of the Year when it comes to boxing, especially with the performances he's put in his last 2 fights. Starting off with that Wilfredo Vasquez Jr. bout that he had in San Antonio, where he did hurt his hand, and he's been dealing with a hand injury and still outclassing and destroying some of these guys. It's unreal. So hopefully, Nonito Donair, Abner Mares will be made, or maybe Guillermo Rigondeaux and Donair can be made, but the Rigondeaux situation, he was supposed to fight that night also, and it was kind of scary that his opponent tested positive for HIV before the fight. So I bet he was just freaking out. You're relieved, and you thank goodness that they do these random tests like that. But not necessarily for drug. The test result for the Manny Pacquiao Juan Manuel Marquez fight came back negative, but all they did was a urine test. There wasn't no blood test. and it was Juan Manuel Marquez who did propose the idea of having tests beforehand, and Bob Arum that said no, it's not necessary. So, I mean, you just wonder what's going on. Yeah, it is a shocker there, and also when it comes to, I don't know if a lot of people, I'm sure a lot of hardcore boxing fans know this, but when it comes to Nonito Donair, it's interesting that he's taking these drug tests, and both Olympic style and just good old regular clinic tests to see if he's positive. But his strength and conditioning, or his supplement guy, is Victor Conti, who was behind the whole Barry Bonds scandal and all of that. So it's very interesting to see how the guy that's backing Donair up, we used to be one of the biggest dealers of illegal supplements, but he served his time, and I mean, maybe he's changed.
Yeah, well, interesting enough, and we'll get to this discussion later on, but I'll just mention this since you brought Victor Conte's name up. Listen to, I know we don't kind of endorse other podcasts, but Joe Rogan has a podcast, and Victor Conte was on there, and for 2 hours kind of goes over his entire history with all the his performance-enhancing drugs. Really interesting stuff, and I think he has changed. I think he kind of knows that his name's tarnished, and that you'd kind of be stupid to do the same thing over again. So he's certainly a guy that has plenty of knowledge on who's positive and who's not. I mean, he's even suggested some things about Usain Bolt, about him possibly taking performance-enhancing drugs despite how he looks. So if you just have some spare time, please check that out. But I want to get to Jorge Arce's legacy. He's not a fighter that you really hear too much about. Can you guys kind of go into detail what Arce has meant to the sport of boxing exactly, and what, to kind of casual fans and kind of people that don't even know, who haven't heard of him besides this Saturday, what exactly does it mean to the sport of boxing?
Well, his record's 61-7-2. He comes from Los Mochis, Sinaloa, which is a couple of hours away from Culiacan, Sinaloa, which is known as the hometown and birth city of Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. But out of a town of 200,000 people of Los Mochis, they actually, a couple of years ago, they actually had 5 world champions in 5 different world divisions. So, I mean, this guy comes from a line, or a city, I should say, of champions. 61-7-2. That's 71 fights. A couple of no contests in there also that this guy has been a part of. And when you think of a Mexican fighter, you stereotypical one, you think of Jorge Arce, just for the wars and just the disregard for his own safety to go in there. If you think about it, it's kind of, and I wrote about this earlier this week when I wrote about Leonard Garcia, but basically if you're going to a fight or you want to watch a fight, you want to watch Jorge Arce just because of the sheer excitement and entertainment value he'll actually bring into the contest. I mean, he's a former super flyweight champion, former bantamweight champion. This guy's proven himself. So former super bantamweight champion. So I believe he's a 3-time world champion. So he's definitely one of the most decorated Mexican fighters in the last 5 years. And I mean, we're going to miss him just for the entertainment value that he did bring. Hopefully he's able to find something. He did promise his kids that if he were to lose, he would stop fighting. But I mean, he's only 33 years old. So I mean, hopefully he can make a difference, go back to either Mexico and train some more fighters to actually carry the torch for the Mexican warrior legacy, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I mean, we're going to miss seeing that Mexican cowboy hat and that lollipop he was rocking, you know what I mean? But, yeah, he, like Jorge said, he's a quintessential Mexican fighter. And he actually, he has won, 4 titles in different, he won 4 titles in 4 different weight divisions. So, he was a great fighter, very entertaining. I was kind of wondering if Larry Merchant was going to put him on the Gotti list, but, he didn't. But nevertheless, great fighter. And I'm glad to see that he's retiring at 33. He still has, his whole life ahead of him. And I just think he did the right thing. His last fight, I just expected so much more. But, for him to get knocked out in that fashion, it's time to go. But there's no shame in his game, and he'll be missed.
Very quickly, Will, Hall of Famer, yes or no?
Oh man, that's a rough one. You have to remind me of some of the classic big name fights that he had to put him in the Hall of Fame. Because I'm just thinking of the wars that I'm trying to reminisce in terms of the wars that he's been in that would make him Hall of Fame worthy.
That's a good point. I mean, even if you didn't know who the guy was, I mean, he did defend. He did just bring entertainment value. I mean, Did lose to Victor Chinian. I mean, that was a big loss that was on his record. He beat Rafael Concepcion in early in Concepcion's career. I'm trying to think of who else this dude fought. I mean, Wilfredo Vasquez Jr. was a huge win. It's because Wilfredo Vasquez, was undefeated at that time. The dude was 22-0, and Wilfredo Vasquez's other loss was only to Nonito Donair. So a pretty big Puerto Rican name, recent in that super bantam division. But I think just the style and excitement that he brought, and also being, I believe, only the second Mexican to win a belt in 4 different weight divisions. So I think just that, and just being that he's one of, I guess, the most decorated Mexican fighters of all time, I think not necessarily maybe a first ballot Hall of Famer, but maybe the second or third year that he's up on the ballot, I think he'll get in.
Mm-hmm. He deserves it.
Let's talk about Amir Khan's performance. I think everybody was thinking that if Khan did not get the win on Showtime, that his career as a serious contender could be in jeopardy. What do you think of his performance over Carlos Molina in the 10th round via TKO on Showtime? What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I mean, it was, and just real quick, there's also talks of him fighting Mayweather as well. So
Amir Khan.
He's in the cards as well. I don't think that fight against Molina was Mayweather worthy. But in terms of, remind me of Andre Ward's trainer again, Jorge, please.
Virgil Hunter.
Yeah, Virgil Hunter. I was trying to look in terms of the main differences, between, Khan's trainer, Freddie Roach and Virgil Hunter. And, Virgil Hunter had him moving around a little bit more. He looked like of course, he was being cautious, but not too cautious in the fact that it made a boring fight. But I just never got the sense that Molina really had a chance. But, when you think about it logically, it was a good fight for him to come back on to make sure that he gets that confidence again, gets back on the winning streak. But I'm just wondering in terms of that performance, I don't think that prepared him for the likes of a Mayweather, in terms of maybe some other fights that we'll see him again is, some of the rematches, while these other guys are getting lined up for, 2013 with these big fights, is to, maybe, talk about that, just doing some avenging himself in the ring, maybe against Prescott, another fight with maybe Garcia down the line. But when I heard about the talks of Mayweather, I was like, I just really don't think that he's ready for that. And maybe, I don't know, these Canelo and Guerrero, they're definitely gonna be waiting for Mayweather. But whoever doesn't get Mayweather on May 4th, that might possibly be a matchup as well for Amir Khan.
I think the reason Amir might not get this fight, either way, nothing surprises me. Josecito Lopez did go up 2 weight classes to challenge Canelo, so I guess nothing would surprise me. But with Amir, he's still fighting in the light welterweight division. He'd have to move up to welterweight at least to fight Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather ultimately going to have to, he'll probably come down from 154. He doesn't actually spend too much time at 154 when he does fight at it. So, it'd have to be done at welterweight, and I think the more, I guess, lucrative fight, if you think about it, it is Guerrero, Khan, or Alvarez. Well, obviously Manny Pacquiao, but that's not going to happen. But when it comes to Amir Khan, he's in a dangerous division, the light welterweight division. So I'm glad Virgil Hunter is having him move around the ring a lot more. Let's see, the top 4 guys in that division. Juan Manuel Marquez can knock anyone out, as we found out last weekend. Danny Garcia has knocked him out. Lucas Matisse, I don't even have to say anything. Brandon Rios, I don't have to say anything either. Zab Judah would be the only, maybe a...
What about Peterson?
I guess a rematch with him. You know what, Peterson, that wouldn't be bad to see Peterson come back. You're very good point. I think he cannot box Peterson. Peterson has, he doesn't have many knockouts. I'm looking at his knockout ratio to wins now. It's about 50%. So that would be a very good fight for the two to fight again. Especially, I thought their first fight was pretty exciting, man. So
it was.
We'll see if Peterson picks up a fight, after his suspension. And we'll see if he's willing to go through extra tests, and I'm sure Amir Khan would force him, and I'm sure that the commission would force him to take after testing positive for performance enhancers. So I would like that. Amir Khan, Lamont Peterson, that would be a very good fight. I thought it was a very entertaining fight the first time around. But, when we talk about guys who have power, I just read off Murderer's Row, man. It's dangerous. A fight against Matisse, do not take. against Rios. Don't do it. And we'll see how the whole top-rank Golden Boy issue has an effect.
Hopefully, Peterson's going to turn down the rematch that they're talking about with Bradley as well, because I don't think anybody's interested in seeing that fight. So I'd rather just, hope for the Peterson can, clean up his performance enhancers drugs act and go ahead and get this possible rematch with Amir Khan. I would really enjoy seeing that fight.
You know what I thought was crazy is that, we talk about Bradley a lot, but I didn't realize this, but the guy's only fought 3 or 4 times in the last 4 years, or in the last 3 years.
I know.
It's just unreal.
And they haven't been really, entertaining fights. I mean, I was just thinking about Bradley right now, and I'm just like, in my mind, I'm like, okay, when's the last time we saw Bradley in a fight that we were just roaring and raving about? And nothing came to mind. I mean, if we're going to talk about that Peterson real quick, I mean, that first fight, was, a huge disappointment. Even though he beat Manny Pacquiao, like we said, numerous times, it's like it didn't even happen because of the controversy. And then against that, he fought Devin Alexander as well, right?
Yep.
And that fight was
terrible.
Well, I can barely, I couldn't even remember it. So that's what I'm saying with Timothy Bradley. He's, he's a champ. He's always comes in excellent shape, but he just hasn't been in a classic fight where you're remembering and you're looking forward to seeing him again. And you're right, Jorge. He's only fought like 3 or 4 times. That's way too long for trying to achieve what he's trying to do in terms of being a Hall of Famer as he claims. So it'd be interesting to see what he plans to do in 2013. But that Peterson is a bad matchup if that's the route that they're going.
You know what I remember the most about the night that him and Devin Alexander fought, Timothy Bradley and Devin Alexander, is that Nick Diaz and Evangelista Santos fought that same night. That's what I remember.
That's bad. That says it all right there.
Luckily, that Diaz versus Cyborg fight was a pretty damn exciting one, so it saved my night from such an atrocious boxing match, man.
Yeah, that was pretty terrible. Let's shift to MMA talk. 2 UFC cards. I don't think we're going to run down the entire thing, but there are some notable things to talk about. Really, on the Saturday card, lots of knockouts. Really exciting night of MMA if you were to, have an open mind somewhat, even though you weren't seeing the biggest names. Really, it's pretty solid matchups. I want to go start with that preliminary card and talk about... I want to get this guy's name right. He trains, I think, out of Jackson's MMA, the Russian, Rustam Kalayev. Is that right? Or
yeah, that's right. Okay. I mean, that's pretty damn close. I mean, I can't.
He had a huge... I was calling him the Russian Kurt Angle because, that suplex on Vince Pichel was incredible. He got the suplex in round 1, 215. Unbelievable. I mean, it's a brutal suplex. I mean, he did the same thing in an I-1 challenge. That clip's on YouTube somewhere. Just unbelievable. Really impressive. Also, he had Johnny Bedford, former Jackson's MMA series main event participant. He got a victory in the second round. Also, Mike Pyle defeated James Head via KO. In terms of the main card, Jorge, with Jonathan Brookins, he won the Ultimate Fighter, but he faced, Dustin Poirier is a monster. And it just seemed like a mismatch to me, despite him winning the show. He seemed way in over his head, getting submitted via Darce choke. Why did the UFC even decide to make this match? Because I know UFC, you know how they are, at least lately, in terms of guys winning the show, they're going to put him in against, tough competition, but this seemed to be going a little bit overboard, don't you think?
I thought so too. I don't know if they just thought that Poirier was going to have a difficult contest just because he lost to Chan Sung Jung in his last fight by the same exact submission, which is crazy, man. You think? I mean, he basically absorbed just that submission after being after submitting to it and took it to Jonathan Brookins. I agree, man. It made no sense to me when I first heard of the matchup. I mean, I thought he was going to get outclassed, and didn't last too long. It only went 1 round, and that's one of my favorite submissions too, man. But I mean, poor Jonathan Brookins. I thought from the beginning he was in over his head on that contest.
Yeah, he was doing pretty well in the stand-up, but just eventually, man, time was time was limited. Also, Patrick Berry, one of my favorite fighters. Even though he's not up on the top of the food chain in terms of the heavyweight division, always exciting. Seems like a good dude. Defeated Shane Del Rosario. Rosario is coming off, he had a tragic car accident that he's trying to make a comeback from. But this does not seem like the same fighter that he garnered so much attention in Strikeforce. He got KO'd this round 2 in 26 seconds. What do you think of Pat Berry? I mean, my thing with the heavyweight division is you don't have to be a perfect fighter to be successful. So I think with Pat Berry, I mean, he's not the greatest fighter in the world, but you saw with Roy Nelson. I mean, his record is pretty mediocre, and yet he was in the main event and got the KO victory. So, I mean, Pat Berry has charisma. He's exciting. People like him. Could you see him kind of, we've seen, with Nick Diaz and with Chael Sonnen, two guys that didn't deserve title shots, both get in lines for the belt. Could you see, in terms of if there's something horrible happening, could Pat Berry somehow look himself into a title shot into the near future, hypothetically?
He has to win. He has to find a way to win 2 consecutive fights because he hasn't done it since he's been with the UFC. I mean, he's either win 1, lose 1, or win 1, lose 2 since he's been with the UFC in 2008. So it's going to be very interesting to see what he's able to do and bounce back from this victory. I mean, this previous fight against LeVar Johnson, he got TKO'd. So he's going to have to build a streak of at least 2 or 3 fights to even be considered for that, I think. I mean, you say it. Something drastic might happen, then yeah, it's possible. But I don't think the UFC is going to consider him until he's able to put a winning streak together in the promotion.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Ultimate Fighter finale. Colton Smith defeats Mike Ricci. I thought it was a pretty lackluster fight, to be honest. It was a tournament final. Usually, I know with the switch over to the tough smashes that took place the night before, Robert Whittaker and Brad Scott, that was an unbelievable fight in their welterweight tournament final. But with this one, Colton Smith and Mike Ricci, really mediocre fight. Colton Smith, I think but I think with Colton Smith, he has improved over the show, defeating maybe the overdressed Mike Ricci. I think it might have been that Ricci might have been a little bit overconfident. If you see him in the build-up to that fight and his new best friend, Rory McDonald, you see him kind of hanging with the women, just drinking wine. It kind of made him out to be not taking the sport too seriously compared to Colton Smith, who served our country and is just in the gym 24/7. It does seem like according to the video we saw, Mike Ricci kind of took Colton Smith a little bit lightly, despite being from a great camp out of TriStar. In the main event, Roy Nelson gets the KO over Matt Mitrione. He had lost his mouthpiece mid into the round 1, and that's pretty much the beginning of the end. Roy Nelson just saw red and just laid the hammer on Mitrione, handing him another loss. With Roy Nelson, what do you think? He's kind of like Pat Berry in that situation. He gets on a little bit of a winning streak, and then he just loses really a major fight that could vault him into the title picture.
Would you like to see them fight each other?
That would be a good fight. I don't see why not you couldn't do that. What about you?
No, I hadn't thought about that till that night, till both guys won. I said, what, that might be a pretty entertaining fight. What I love about Roy Nelson is, he looked a little bit better this fight. Just his body, I think. He's
been improving his body. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully he's shaping up. But because this guy, his boxing is pretty damn good for an MMA heavyweight. He has quick hands and very accurate hands. I don't know if you noticed, but with Mitrione, he caught him with all 4 punches, even as Mitrione was falling, which was pretty crazy to me. And Mitrione was out. He did take this fight on so much short notice. So
he did.
Definitely a tough contest to come in through, especially if you're fighting Roy Nelson. Roy Nelson's no walkover. He's going to give you one hell of a fight either way. So, that'd be a pretty good fight. Maybe the next fight for both of them, Roy Nelson versus a Berry deal. I like that.
I think the only negative about that fight is that both guys are somewhat big names in that division, and maybe you want to build them up. And I think having one of them beat each other kind of eliminates one out of major fights for a while. So I think, with Roy Nelson, he's kind of, I don't want to say Teflon, but he's pretty close. A guy could lose a bunch and still people are interested in what he does. So I think the only part of that fight, there are, both, winning, on big win streaks. I know that Nelson's won 2 in a row. maybe if, Pat Barry wins another fight, you have two guys who won two in a row, maybe you do it then. But I think that's an intriguing matchup. So, guys, we don't have too much fights to talk about this weekend, so I want to get to kind of a overall topic in combat sports. I don't know if you guys caught the Fight Game special on HBO. It was after the Nonito Donair fight, hosted by Jim Lampley. Lampley was pretty much, going over Larry Merchant's legacy, his commentary on HBO, going over his awards for 2012. And interesting enough, he named the 2012 Person of the Year to be Margaret Goodman, who is the, chairman of VADA, the Voluntary Anti-Doping Agency. They're the ones that tested Nonito Donair. They're the ones that tested BJ Penn, Rory McDonald, Roy Nelson. They have really had a huge year in terms of getting their cause across. So I want to ask you guys, in terms of really both sports, MMA and boxing, I think boxing is more of a commission problem because really Golden Boy, Top Rank, they're more of a promotional vehicle. They're not really a organization or a league compared to the UFC. So I guess let's talk about boxing first. I mean, they've had the most notable test failures. Do you think this has really harmed boxing? Because, in terms of big fights, those kind of seem to be unaffected in terms of, the ESPNs or the major newspapers really noticing this to be a huge problem. So what do you guys think of this? Do you think HBO is making too big of a deal out of this, with the Lamont Peterson thing? Or what do you guys think of this topic?
I mean, we're in the... Go ahead. Okay. So we're in the post, I guess, baseball steroid era, and we saw how much it hurt baseball. But again, baseball is probably one of the top 4 marketable and watched sports here in the United States. Boxing has, been on the decline for a while. I think this year it's made a strong case to make its way back into the mainstream. But when it comes to the drug testing, as you mentioned, there isn't an entity, a UFC, that controls everything. It's, several sanctioning bodies, several promoters that deal with these sanctioning bodies and these commissions that are often paid off. I mean, not all of them, obviously, but there is some money passed under the table. It's very difficult with boxing, but for HBO to try to do this, I think it's great. With boxing, I mean, it's like Jim Lampley said, you don't play boxing, you do this. I mean, you're risking your life every time that you're out there, and you want to make sure that the guy that you're fighting is on an even playing field. And this sport, more than any of the other ones, more than baseball, more than football, is important just because of how violent it is. I mean, you're literally carrying the life of the other person in your hands if you're injecting yourself with these other things that are going to enhance your performance. And if you hurt them, you know what I mean? Are you going to be able to live with that for the rest of your life? So it's a very good point that they're trying to push. For them to give her, I mean, their Person of the Year was very interesting, but maybe it's their way of just giving boxing a little slap in the face. But I know we got to do it. I mean, fortunately, the big fights, and when I mean to say big, it's like the mega fights, haven't really been too affected by someone testing positive. I mean, we're lucky that we really didn't have the testing for it, but we're lucky that the Marcus Pacquiao fight didn't get interrupted by someone testing positive. I mean, we did after the fact with the Lamont Peterson and Amir Khan, but they just got to do better testing beforehand, during training, and and hopefully everyone steps to the plate. I mean, if you say you're the best, take the test, like Floyd Mayweather said.
That's exactly where I was going, Jorge. I was saying now, back in the day, of course we discussed it in terms of it should come from the commission opposed from coming from the fighter, but everybody was getting real irritated with Floyd, but now we see, in the fight game, it's a serious issue. They've had a lot of tragedies in boxing, a lot more deaths than MMA. So of course they're looking forward to cleaning up the sport, and it's just interesting, like as Lampley pointed out too. I mean, this is just canceled. Huge events. We were just talking about that. The Lamont Peterson and Khan canceled because of this. The Berto versus Ortiz rematch canceled because of this. So, I mean, I think fans are really irritated, and great fights like that could take place without performance enhancing drugs. But this is just something that we have to do in the sport of boxing. So, I thought it was cool that they made her the Person of the Year because it sends out a reminder that it's not going to be tolerated. Even like the Ring magazine, they're taking, whoever gets caught with performance-enhancing drugs, if they were on the pound-for-pound list, they're taking them off of that list. But, like you said before, it was a great point. Regardless if they're taking them out of the list, regardless if events are getting canceled, the individuals who find a way to still put performance-enhancing drugs into their diet and go into the ring and possibly cost somebody their life, that could be tragic. Of course. You talk about fines, removing from the list, somebody's life could be lost. So of course, that's extreme, and this doesn't necessarily happen every time. You remember when Fernando Vargas, he tested positive for performance enhancers, and, that really didn't help him at all in the Oscar De La Hoya fight. So, of course, it gives fighters edges in their performance, but it, of course, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to win. Boxing is not some, weightlifting contest. Often, the muscles in this sport often weigh fighters down, actually. But in terms of, like, the endurance and maybe possibly the ability to sustain a little bit more punishment is there. But, case in point, the fighters got to clean up their act. But I just wonder, as we spoke before as well, about the technology advance, and it's going to be more easy to detect these type of fighters. And I know there's sadistically some fans out there that are probably going to get irritated because more events are going to be canceled. So it's going to be interesting to see how everybody receives these new testing for performance-enhancing drugs.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just think it's kind of with boxing, I think it's easier because, it's up to the commissions. I mean, with the Nevada State Athletic Commission, they've come under scrutiny with the whole Nick Diaz thing, with not instituting blood testing. You talked about it with that, Jorge. It's only through urine. That's a huge problem. That's only through just pre and post. There's no random drug testing, which they do. They do that in MMA and boxing. They do random drug testing in the state of Nevada, but it's kind of like they pick and choose. And a lot of the excuses are with the government, with money. It just seems like there's not one overall sanctioning body to take care of this. It's just it's up to the fighters to kind of police this, and that's never going to solve any problems when you just have BJ Penn. Every time you fight BJ Penn, you got to get this VADA testing. No fighter's going to do that. Besides, I think a lot of fighters. To me, I may sound naive, but in terms of with MMA, I think the majority are clean. To be honest, I think you saw with Stephen Bonner, he still got destroyed by Anderson Silva, and I think with these guys, I think they don't want to do the testing because it's aggregate. It's just annoying. You got to take your time away from either your family time or from your training. You got to do this. You got to pay for it. The pay is a big thing, and that could be extremely annoying. And I think, if you trust the UFC, for instance, as they're an organization, I don't trust a promoter to be in charge of a drug test. It didn't really have to work well with baseball, and they're supposed to be the honorable, clean sport. And as much as I respect Dana White, I don't trust the UFC with testing their athletes all the way. To be honest, let's say you get rid of the commissions and the UFC is responsible for testing all these guys. What happens if George St. Pierre, he fights, Anderson Silva, and they have a random drug test and GSP tests positive? I don't really trust Dana White to release that information. I really don't. So, do you think the answer is a overarching national commission comprised of former referees, former commission members to kind of oversee both combat sports, or should it be separate? Or what do you think? It's kind of a complicated problem to fix.
I think it should be separate if it did in fact exist. But when it comes to boxing, there's too much money in too many people's wallets. That's what the problem is. It's not 2 or 3 individuals that are running it. It's literally hundreds of people, whether it's at a regional level, a local level, or even an international level. And that's the sport. It's gone 100 years, over 100 years. Without it. It's going to continue that way, I think, just because of the fact the wealth is spread too far out and the power is spread to too many people.
I completely agree with that statement. It's just too much money. There's too many politics in boxing. I can see them, discussing it, as fighters get exposed in mixed martial arts. Of course, boxing wants to let the public know that they also have concerns, but ultimately, I don't know. I guess I'm kind of pessimistic. I don't see that much change being implemented in the near future until, of course, another tragedy happens, and then maybe they'll expedite the process.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
We got 5 more minutes left. I think the last couple of weeks we've been under the gun in terms of just trying to fit everything in. But anything you guys wanted to discuss that we couldn't talk about a couple of weeks ago? I know the Oscar. Go ahead.
I wanted to quickly discuss just some, I guess, news that went out today that's not too surprising because she did pretty much accept the contest at the end of her bout. But Holly Holm officially accepted Cecilia Braekhus' challenge. I mean, officially it hit Facebook. That's all I'm trying to say by saying that
really?
It's official. Yes.
Huh,
she accepted.
Okay.
She accepted the challenges, and Frescas Productions, who's Holly Holm's manager and promoter, did say that the negotiations are about to begin, as Holly Holm will take on Cecilia Braekhus, hopefully in July in Las Vegas, as Cecilia Braekhus' call-out video indicated last week. So that fight is hopefully going to go down. I mean, Frescas Productions is willing to talk to Cecilia Braekhus' camp, so we'll see if it is set for July.
So do you think it will be under, like you were saying, Jorge, your theory was it will be under a European main event, or could you see them headlining a show on her own?
And again, I mean, she's promoted by Sauerland Productions, so I mean, the promotion company out of Germany, they have some decent talent that they can put on the main event, even if it's like, you know, a decent HBO card or something. I find it hard to think, like, what organization, what TV network will take this? Will HBO or Showtime be willing to put a female boxing event on their channel for the first time in ages? And I just can't think of it, man. And you know, some of the fighters again that they do have under their belt, Braekhus is one of them. Arthur Abraham is one. I mean, they have Robert Helenius, who's a decent heavyweight. Joan Pablo Hernandez, who had some good wins this year, a cruiserweight. I mean, I just don't know. I think these two females might be a bigger name than they have. You know what would be good? If they had Mikkel Kessler headline the card against another former champion or current champion and then have them on the undercard. I don't think they're going to be headlining the event. I think it might be too difficult for them to host something like that, especially in Las Vegas. They're meeting on mutual ground, so I don't know if they have too big of a name outside of New Mexico and outside of Europe, I guess you can say. I mean, I think they do, but I don't know if the rest of the boxing world feels that way.
Another thing that took place over the weekend was the All Access special with Austin Trout and Miguel Cotto. Our very own Jorge Hernandez was featured on that. So if you don't see Jorge on the show in 2013, he got to start on that All Access special. His claim to fame will be that the last episode of that All Access. But I wanted to talk to you guys real quickly. There was a scene with the weigh-in that Austin Trout's family was not allowed in there. Was that correct? Where they weren't allowed, there just wasn't enough room for their family, where Miguel Cotto's family and entourage was all set. You know, Trout's people were pushed in back, and Austin was pretty upset about that. Even during the fight, you saw, you know, Miguel Cotto's wife ringside, and yet Austin Trout's whole family is really kind of someone in the nosebleeds. What do you guys think of that?
Well, I think it's kind of messed up, man. That they didn't allow him in. But the thing is, the ballroom they hosted in was pretty small. I'm sure. I mean, there were tons of, you know, fire code violations that were infringed upon that day, just because of the fact there were probably maybe 1,100 people in there, and that room could have probably only fit 600 people comfortably. So it was just pretty crazy that they had it in such a small room. I guess the reason they didn't have it in Madison Square Garden is because the Knicks were playing that night, so they didn't want too many people in the building a few hours before the actual fights. I don't know if it was just security issues or what that was, but you know, it's kind of weird that they didn't give the Trout family or gave Trout some passes for his family to enter. There were a lot of media there, man. There were probably a good 60, 70 members of the media that were there, and then you had other fighters who were weighing in with their trainers and coaches in there too. So you could only imagine the amount of people that were there that weren't necessarily fans.
Sure. So that's going to conclude our show. One more thing, our LowBlow Awards, it is official. Our award show we do each and every year will be January 5th That is a Saturday, so stay tuned for that. We usually do it on the Ustream, but more details will be coming soon. You can get in touch with the show through our email address, lowblow505@gmail.com, through Twitter, through @TheLowBlow, also through Facebook, through LowBlow Podcast. Also, check out FightFans Radio through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Ustream. So this has been a Low Blow on FightFans Radio, Southwest Fight, and U.S. Combat Sports. I am Justin Goodrum. You've heard Jorge Hernandez and Will McClary, and we'll see you next week.
Peace.